How dare you touch me, you miserable old woman? Do you know who I am? My fiancé is Ethan Blake. Yes, the Ethan Blake. Vanessa's voice rang out across the crowded market like a siren. Before the elderly woman could even respond, Vanessa's manicured hand slapped her cheek. Sharp, sudden, and humiliating. Gasps rose from the crowd. Phones came out. But what Vanessa didn't know was that the woman she just struck was Ethan's mother. Before we continue, subscribe for more gripping folktale stories. Like, share, and stay to the end, because this one will leave you speechless. Now, let's dive into the story. Vanessa Wright lived like a queen. She drove a custom white Range Rover with rose gold trim, wore designer outfits flown in from Milan, and carried herself like royalty walking among peasants. Her Instagram bio read, "Future Mrs. Blake billionaire babe elegance isn't optional." To most people, Vanessa was intimidating, untouchable, beautiful, but behind the filtered selfies and luxury brunches was a woman obsessed with status and deeply afraid of losing it. She had met Ethan Blake 6 months ago at an art auction in New York. Tall, calm, and striking in a classic navy suit, Ethan didn't just walk in money. He came from it. The son of one of the country's wealthiest industrialists, Ethan ran several successful tech companies by age 30. To Vanessa, he was the final piece in her dream life. And Ethan? He was captivated, not just by her looks, but by her boldness. She said what others wouldn't. Dressed like she owned every room. It was exciting at first. On that particular afternoon, he stood on his balcony, looking out over the city skyline, a tray of espresso in hand. Vanessa was curled up on the sofa in an emerald silk robe, scrolling through her phone with diamond-studded nails. "You remember I mentioned Mom's coming back this week?" he asked. Vanessa glanced up. "Yeah, you said she was out of the country. Some village project, or whatever." Ethan chuckled. "She doesn't call it that. She says she's learning from real people." Vanessa smirked. "That's cute." Ethan hesitated. "I want you to meet her. Tomorrow." Vanessa set her phone down. "Tomorrow?" "Yes. She's back in the city. I thought dinner, something private. She prefers it simple." Vanessa nodded slowly, the word simple already grating against her nerves. "Of course. I'll make sure I'm ready." Ethan leaned down and kissed her forehead. "Thanks, babe. It means a lot." To Ethan, this was a step forward, blending two worlds he cared about. He was excited, hopeful that his strong-willed girlfriend and his soft-spoken mother would find a connection. But what Ethan couldn't see, or perhaps chose not to, was the growing gap between his mother's quiet wisdom and Vanessa's loud pride. He had overlooked the warning signs. Like the time Vanessa snapped at a waitress for bringing her sparkling water without ice. Or how she rolled her eyes when his driver forgot to open her door. Or how she once laughed at an old man struggling with his groceries outside their building. "It's not my job to rescue people," she had said with a shrug. Still, Ethan believed love could soften rough edges. He believed that, deep down, Vanessa had a good heart. One that had simply grown guarded by the walls she built climbing to the top. He had seen flashes of tenderness. Once, she had stayed up all night with him when his cousin was in the hospital. Another time, she donated a large sum to a children's shelter, though she posted about it right after. Those glimpses gave Ethan hope. He didn't know, however, that the next 48 hours would shatter that illusion. That the very woman he wanted to blend into his family would do something so prideful, so cruel, that it would force him to question everything he thought he knew about love. For now, though, he held on to the dream. That Vanessa, the woman he'd fallen for, would charm his mother with grace and humility. He had no idea that the two had already met, and the damage was already done. The morning sun shimmered over the city skyline as Vanessa stepped out of her SUV, designer sunglasses perched on her nose, a silk scarf tied perfectly around her neck. She had insisted on going alone today, a rare moment. Even her driver raised a brow. "I'll call you when I'm done," she said sharply, waving him off as if dismissing a servant. Her destination? A local organic food market. Ethan had mentioned his mother enjoyed shopping there, said the vendors were honest, the produce fresh, the people kind. In Vanessa's world, it sounded like code for cheap. Still, she had a plan. Charm the vendors. Buy some flowers. Pretend to care. That way, when she met Ethan's mother for dinner, she could casually drop, "Oh, I love the little market you go to. I was there just this morning." The place wasn't exactly what she expected. There were no polished counters or air-conditioned aisles. Instead, rustic wooden stalls lined a narrow walkway, and the air smelled of ripe fruit, sun-warmed bread, and earthy herbs. She clicked across the uneven pavement in her heeled boots, drawing glances, some admiring, some confused. She stopped at a fruit stall and picked up a pear, turning it like she was inspecting a precious gem. "Madam, that one is very sweet," the vendor said warmly. "Picked just this morning." Vanessa didn't respond. She placed the pear down and kept walking. Halfway through the market, as she passed a stall of woven baskets, she felt a gentle brush on her shoulder. Accidental, barely a touch. But Vanessa spun around. "Watch where you're going," she snapped. An elderly woman stood there, small and humble, dressed in a plain blue blouse and a faded brown skirt. She had a soft face, eyes that smiled without effort. Her hands were full, 2 paper bags balanced in her arms. "Oh dear, I'm so sorry," the woman said kindly. "I didn't mean to bump into you." "These bags." Vanessa cut her off. "These bags? That's your excuse for stumbling into people? Do you know how much this outfit costs?" The woman blinked, her expression unreadable. "I only meant..." "You meant to ruin my morning?" Vanessa hissed. "God, you people have no self-awareness." People were starting to stare. The fruit vendor from earlier watched with a frown. A young mother whispered something to her son and guided him away. Still, Vanessa wasn't finished. "You should be banned from places like this. You don't even belong here. Next time, keep your hands to yourself." As the old woman tried to adjust her grip on the bags, one tore slightly at the bottom. A pair rolled out, bumping against Vanessa's shoe. She kicked it aside without looking. Pathetic. And then, with one final look of disgust, Vanessa turned and strutted away, heels clicking sharply as silence followed in her wake. The woman didn't shout, didn't scold. She simply looked down, adjusted her torn bag, and whispered to no one in particular. Even gold can be covered in dust. The wise do not judge a jewel by its case. But Vanessa didn't hear that part. She was already typing a text to Ethan. "See you at dinner." Picked up something lovely from the market kiss mark. Vanessa didn't get far before fate decided to drag the moment out. She had paused at a flower stall, pretending to admire a bouquet of white lilies when a voice behind her asked softly, "Excuse me, miss. I think you dropped this." She turned. It was the same old woman, the one she had just scolded, standing quietly with the same soft expression and the same torn paper bag, now with a bruised pear in her wrinkled hand. Vanessa blinked in disbelief. "You again?" Her voice rose. "What is wrong with you? Are you following me now?" A few heads turned again. The vendor at the flower stall looked uneasy. "No, dear," the woman said gently. "The fruit rolled from your bag." "I don't want your filthy fruit," Vanessa snapped. "And stop calling me dear. I'm not your friend." The woman's brow furrowed, but she said nothing. Vanessa leaned in slightly, lowering her voice but sharpening her tone. "Let me guess. You're one of those poor grandmothers who sell beads by the roadside and think you can talk to anyone like your equals?" The woman stayed calm. "I simply thought it was kind to return what was dropped." "Kindness. Please," Vanessa sneered. "You think kindness is stumbling into people, embarrassing them in public, and chasing them down with rotten fruit like a beggar?" That was it. The crowd around the stall went quiet. Even the florist stopped arranging his stems. "You shouldn't speak to people that way," someone muttered from behind a bread stall. Vanessa turned like a viper. "Excuse me." The old woman, however, simply smiled, and it wasn't a weak smile. It was knowing, like she'd heard worse and still chosen grace. She reached out, trying one last time to hand the fruit over. "Sometimes, what we kick away is what we might one day need." Vanessa's eyes narrowed. Her pride prickled. Her ego boiled. And in a flash of emotion, she did what no one expected. She slapped the fruit out of the woman's hand. It hit the ground with a wet thud, and the old woman's hand remained outstretched for a second longer, before slowly falling to her side. Gasps rose from the market again. "Next time," Vanessa said coldly, adjusting her purse strap, "keep your wrinkled hands and cheap wisdom to yourself." And then she walked away, fast this time. The click of her heels now an echo of shame across the silent walkway. Behind her, the old woman crouched slowly to pick up the ruined pear. The florist stepped forward, offering a small bag to help. Another woman handed her a fresh fruit from her own stall. No one chased after Vanessa. She thought she had made a statement, that she had put someone in their place. But in truth, she had only put herself in a spotlight she wouldn't be able to escape. Not when the woman she humiliated was far more than she appeared to be. The old woman remained crouched beside the fallen fruit, her fingers gently brushing the dust from the bruised pear Vanessa had knocked down. Around her, the quiet hum of the market resumed in careful murmurs. But the atmosphere had shifted, like a chill settling after a storm. One vendor stepped forward, a young man with calloused hands and soft eyes. "Ma'am, are you okay?" She looked up and smiled. "Yes, dear. Bruises are just reminders that we've been handled, not broken." The crowd, still watching from a respectful distance, seemed stunned by her calm. No outrage. No retaliation. Just grace, wrapped in a woman with weathered hands and a backbone made of quiet strength. "She had no right to treat you like that," the florist muttered, packing stems into a bucket too quickly. "Some of these rich girls think they own the air we breathe." The old woman placed the pear gently into her torn bag. "Anger is easy. Anyone can carry it. But kindness, that's a heavier load." She stood slowly, adjusting her bag as she looked around at the familiar faces of the market. People who knew her only as Mrs. Rose, the kind older woman who always tipped extra for fresh eggs and never left without complimenting someone's garden. But today, none of them knew the truth. None of them knew she was Rose Blake, mother of Ethan Blake, one of the wealthiest young men in the country. And she liked it that way. In this place, there were no drivers, no cameras, no fake smiles. Here, she could see how people truly behaved, especially when they thought they were speaking to someone beneath them. She glanced toward the direction Vanessa had stormed off, then let out a breath that was neither angry nor bitter. She looked toward the sky, her eyes calm and unshaken. There's something life teaches you as you grow older. Pride walks with its head so high, it never sees the fall coming. But humility watches every step and rarely stumbles. The crowd was quiet again, listening. "She thinks I'm no one," Rose said. "And maybe that's the lesson she needs right now. To speak without knowing who's listening. To judge without knowing who's watching." She reached into her bag and pulled out a small handkerchief, tying it around the torn handle to hold it together. And with that, Mrs. Rose turned and walked away, slowly, peacefully, leaving the market behind with nothing but a whisper and a lesson. Vanessa stood in front of her full-length mirror, surrounded by a sea of designer outfits scattered across the bed. Her walk-in closet looked like a boutique hit by a hurricane. Shoes, handbags, and perfume bottles piled in beautiful chaos. Tonight had to be perfect. Ethan's mother. The woman she would one day call Mom. The final gatekeeper to the life she'd been grooming herself for. "I need something elegant," she murmured to herself. "Not too flashy, but not too humble. She needs to know who I am." She finally settled on a cream-colored silk dress with subtle gold embroidery. Soft enough to look graceful, expensive enough to make a statement. She paired it with pearl earrings, a thin gold chain, and nude heels that clicked just right on polished floors. Vanessa had spent all afternoon curating the look, not just for Ethan's mother, but for the moment she'd later post on social media with the caption, "Dinner with his queen." First impressions matter. After one last touch of gloss and a few filters on a selfie, she wouldn't post just yet. Vanessa reached into her purse and retrieved a small, square box. Inside was a brooch, vintage, delicately carved, with a sapphire center. She had bought it that morning from an antique store, thinking it would be the perfect, thoughtful gift for a woman with traditional taste. "Tell her it reminded you of something timeless," the saleswoman had said. Vanessa didn't know what that meant, but it sounded right. She placed the box carefully into a gift bag from a luxury brand. Presentation, always, then picked up her phone. "Vanessa, on my way. Babe can't wait to meet the queen herself." "Ethan, she's excited. Said she wanted to keep things simple. Hope that's okay." Vanessa smiled faintly and typed, "Vanessa, simple is my specialty." The irony didn't faze her. As she headed down to the waiting car, she rehearsed her performance. Warm smiles, just the right amount of compliments. Maybe a story about a struggling childhood, embellished, of course, to show she was humble. What she didn't rehearse, couldn't imagine, was the face waiting behind the front door of the Blake estate. Because tonight, Vanessa wasn't meeting a stranger. She was walking straight into the living room of the woman she had humiliated in public, the woman whose hand she had slapped. the woman she thought was beneath her, and no amount of silk or pearls could prepare her for what was coming. The Blake estate was nothing short of breathtaking. A sweeping stone driveway curved through manicured gardens, leading to a grand mansion that looked like it belonged in a royal film. Towering pillars framed the entrance, and soft golden lights glowed from behind tall, arched windows. Vanessa stepped out of the car like she was arriving at a red carpet event. Her heels tapped confidently as she approached the door, clutching the gift bag in one hand, her best smile already locked in place. Before she could knock, the door opened. Ethan stood there, warm as always, dressed casually in a navy shirt and slacks. "You look amazing," he said, pulling her into a quick embrace. She laughed lightly. "I wanted to make a good impression. She'll love you," Ethan said, oblivious to the ticking time bomb waiting inside. "Come on in." The foyer smelled of lavender and sandalwood. Elegant paintings lined the hallway, and the house had the quiet charm of wealth that didn't try too hard. Timeless, not showy. Vanessa followed him into the sitting room, the gift bag still in hand. She heard the soft clink of china and light footsteps approaching from the far side. And then she saw her. The old woman entered slowly, gracefully, dressed in a simple gray blouse and black slacks, her silver hair pinned neatly. The same soft eyes, the same calm posture, the same woman from the market. Vanessa froze. Her fingers tightened around the gift bag. Her heart dropped to her stomach. A cold sweat trickled beneath her expensive dress. The old woman smiled warmly at Ethan, then turned her gaze to Vanessa. "Mom," Ethan said proudly, "this is Vanessa. Vanessa, meet my mother, Rose." Vanessa's voice caught in her throat. We've met." Ethan blinked. "Really?" Mrs. Rose tilted her head ever so slightly. "Yes," she said softly. "Briefly. At the market." The silence in the room stretched like a blade. Vanessa forced a smile, stepping forward and offering the bag. I got you something. Just a little something I saw today." Mrs. Rose took the bag gently. "How thoughtful," she said, her eyes never leaving Vanessa's. Ethan looked between them, confused by the tension he couldn't quite place. "Shall we sit?" Mrs. Rose gestured to the sofa. Vanessa nodded too quickly. Of course. But she didn't sit like a woman in control. She sat like someone waiting for the floor to give way. Because in that moment, she wasn't Ethan's glamorous girlfriend. She wasn't the billionaire babe or the influencer queen. She was just a woman, exposed before someone she had deeply wronged. And the real dinner hadn't even begun. Dinner was served in the sunroom, a long glass-walled space that overlooked the garden, glowing with lanterns under the twilight sky. But despite the soft lighting, the gentle music, and the clink of silverware against fine china, there was an awkwardness Ethan couldn't shake. Vanessa was quiet, too quiet. She barely touched her food, smiled tightly, and only offered short responses when asked anything. And his mother? She was calm, polite, but not her usual warm self. Ethan, usually oblivious to tension, was beginning to notice the cracks. "So, Vanessa," Mrs. Rose said, sipping her tea, "did you enjoy the market today?" Vanessa hesitated. "It was nice. Different from what I'm used to." Mrs. Rose smiled. "Yes, I imagine it would be. I find beauty in the simple things." There was a pause. Vanessa nodded, eyes darting briefly to Ethan. "Simple has its charm, I guess." Mrs. Rose's eyes held Vanessa's for a moment longer than necessary. Not confrontational, just knowing. Almost like she was waiting for something. Ethan finally spoke. "You two meeting earlier, that was such a coincidence." "What are the odds?" Vanessa gave a strained laugh. "Yes, quite the coincidence." "I didn't realize you'd be there, Mom," Ethan added. "Thought you were coming back in the evening." "I arrived earlier than expected," she replied. "Wanted to see what I'd been missing while I was away." Vanessa's fork clinked against her plate. I hope our first meeting wasn't too awkward." Mrs. Rose tilted her head. "Oh, not at all. It was very revealing." That was the first time Ethan's brow furrowed deeply. He looked between them. "Is something going on?" "No," Vanessa said quickly. But Rose placed her hand gently on the table. "Ethan, sometimes we meet people when they least expect to be seen. No makeup, no stage, no rehearsals." Vanessa froze. "I'm just glad," Rose continued, "that I had the chance to see Vanessa before tonight." Ethan looked at Vanessa. "What's she talking about?" Vanessa tried to laugh it off. "She's just teasing. We had a tiny misunderstanding at the market. That's all." Rose said nothing, just took another sip of her tea, gracefully, powerfully. Ethan watched them both, something cold settling in his chest. He didn't know the whole truth yet, but something wasn't right. And this dinner was no longer about making a good impression. It was about uncovering what had already been hidden. The next morning, Ethan returned to the market alone. He hadn't slept well. Vanessa had left the mansion shortly after dessert, claiming she had a migraine. But even after she'd gone, the silence between Ethan and his mother lingered. Thick, uncomfortable, full of unspoken truths. Now, he found himself retracing her steps, walking past flower stalls and fruit baskets with a strange sense of urgency. He didn't know what he was looking for until he saw the florist, a young man with sandy hair and an apron dusted in pollen. The same one who had watched Vanessa that day. "Excuse me," Ethan said, stepping up to the stall. "You were here yesterday, right?" The florist looked up. "Yeah. Morning. Need some lilies?" "They just came in." Ethan shook his head. "Actually, I'm looking for information. There was an incident here yesterday involving an older woman, gray hair, blue blouse, and my girlfriend, Vanessa." The florist's hands paused mid-trim. His eyes narrowed. "You're with her?" "I was," Ethan replied carefully. "But I think there's something I wasn't told." The florist leaned on the counter, voice low. "Look, man, I don't like getting involved in people's personal stuff. But what happened yesterday wasn't just a little misunderstanding." Ethan waited. "Your girl, she humiliated that woman," the florist said flatly. "Screamed at her, shoved a fruit out of her hand, called her names in front of everyone like she was dirt." Ethan's jaw tightened. "She slapped a pear out of my mom's hand?" The florist blinked. "Wait, your mom?" Ethan didn't answer. His silence was confirmation enough. The vendor sighed. "Then I guess you know now? She didn't act like someone meeting a mother-in-law. She acted like the world owed her respect just because she was wearing heels." Ethan looked away, a bitter taste rising in his throat. "She told me it was just a misunderstanding," he murmured. "Then she misunderstood kindness," the florist said, returning to his stems. "Because that old woman? She didn't yell, didn't fight back, just picked up her fruit and walked away. Like a queen." Ethan stood still, stunned by the weight of what he'd just heard. Everything started to click. The strange tension at dinner, his mother's cool expression, Vanessa's silence. The way Rose had said, "I'm glad I saw her before tonight." It wasn't just a comment. It was a warning. He pulled out his phone, heart pounding, and scrolled through his messages with Vanessa. Photos, flirty texts, plans for vacation. And then, the message she sent right after the market. "See you at dinner. Picked up something lovely from the market, kiss mark." Lovely. She had lied. Even then. Ethan locked his phone and took a slow breath. His hands curled into fists at his sides, but his voice remained steady. "Thank you," he said to the florist. Then he turned and walked away. No flowers, no smile. Just a man who had seen something true. Far too late. Vanessa was sipping champagne by the rooftop pool of her condo when Ethan's name lit up her phone. She smiled faintly, put her glass down, and answered with her usual effortless tone. "Hey babe, everything okay? Where are you?" His voice was sharp. "Cold." Vanessa's smile faded. "At home." "What?" "I went to the market this morning." Her breath caught. "I spoke to people who were there," Ethan continued. "They saw what happened between you and my mother." There was a pause, too long. "Ethan, I don't think you understand," Vanessa said quickly, standing up from her lounge chair and pacing. "It wasn't like that." "Then explain it to me," he said. "Because from what I heard, you humiliated her. In public. Shouted at her. Threw fruit on the ground. Called her names." "I didn't know who she was," Vanessa snapped. "But you knew she was a person," Ethan shot back. "An old woman trying to be kind. And you treated her like trash." "She bumped into me," Vanessa said, defensive now. "I was carrying expensive items. She was careless. You slapped something out of her hand, Vanessa. She provoked me." Her voice rose. "She kept talking to me like she was better than me. Like I wasn't good enough." "She didn't say a single unkind thing to you," Ethan said, voice low now. "She just saw who you really were when no one was watching." Vanessa felt her throat tighten. "So what now? You're going to throw me away over a misunderstanding?" "This wasn't a misunderstanding," he replied. "It was clarity." She stepped back, stunned. "Do you have any idea how embarrassed I felt, sitting there at dinner, watching you pretend like everything was fine while she looked at you, Like she didn't even recognize the woman you were the day before? I was trying to fix it, Vanessa said quietly. I bought her a gift. I dressed respectfully. I smiled. You performed, Ethan said, his tone ice. But love isn't a performance. And neither is character. She opened her mouth to respond, but the silence on his end was louder than anything she could say. Ethan, I loved you, he said. I really did. She froze. But I won't marry someone who can't show basic respect to a stranger, especially when that stranger is my mother. With that, he ended the call. Vanessa stood alone on the rooftop, wind tousling her perfect hair, heart pounding beneath her designer dress. The city lights below sparkled like diamonds. But none of it mattered anymore, because the only person she wanted to impress had just seen the one thing she couldn't hide behind filters or money: her true self. Ethan waited until the following evening to show up at Vanessa's condo, not out of hesitation, but out of necessity. He needed time to cool the storm in his chest before saying what needed to be said. Vanessa opened the door wearing a black satin robe and red lipstick, like she was ready for a romantic apology instead of a reckoning. Ethan, she breathed, I've been waiting. I'm so glad you came. I'm not here to talk, he said firmly, stepping inside. His tone stopped her mid-sentence. I came to return your things. He placed a sleek black box on her marble kitchen counter. Inside it was a bracelet, the first gift he ever gave her, and a spare key to his penthouse. Vanessa's face fell. You're really doing this? Ethan looked at her with the calm of a man who'd been wounded but had already decided to heal without the one who cut him. I don't recognize the person you were that day, Vanessa, he said. And the worst part? You weren't sorry. You were only sorry you got caught. She folded her arms. So what? I made a mistake and now you throw me away. After everything we've shared. You didn't make a mistake, Ethan said. You revealed yourself. There's a difference. Vanessa scoffed. Oh please. Your mother isn't some saint. She was dressed like a beggar at that market. What was I supposed to think? Ethan stared at her, the last of his affection flickering out like a dying flame. She dresses like that on purpose. To remind herself what matters. To stay grounded. You know what she told me once. Vanessa stayed silent. She said, money doesn't make people arrogant. Arrogance just becomes more expensive when you can afford it. Vanessa flinched, the words hitting harder than she expected. I don't care how you dress, Vanessa. I don't care how loud you laugh, or what brand is on your purse, Ethan said. But I care how you treat people, and what you showed me. I can't build a life with that. Her voice trembled. So this is it. He nodded. This is it. For a moment, neither of them moved. The silence was a canyon between them, wide and final. Then Ethan turned, walked to the door, and paused. I hope one day you understand that real elegance comes from within. And when you find it, I hope you treat it better than you treated my mother. The door clicked shut behind him. Vanessa stood in her perfect condo, surrounded by everything she thought mattered. And for the first time, it all felt completely empty. Vanessa had never known silence like this. The kind that pressed against the walls, filled every corner, and echoed through the penthouse like a question with no answer. No ringing phones. No messages. No invitations. Just stillness. A week had passed since Ethan walked out. Her social media, once alive with likes and comments, had gone cold. Her carefully curated photos still sat on her page, filtered, perfect, lifeless. But people weren't interested in perfection anymore. Not after whispers had begun to circulate. Someone had recorded her at the market. The clip was short, blurry, but clear enough to catch her words. You people have no self-awareness. And the slap of fruit hitting the ground. The caption read, this is how some of them act when no one's watching. Arrogance in silk. It spread like wildfire. Brands quietly paused partnerships. A sponsorship deal was pulled. Even a high-end boutique that once begged her to wear their dresses stopped responding to her calls. Vanessa stared at the screen of her phone, message after message unopened. Some fans defended her. Others were cruel. A few influencers she once called friends posted vague stories that felt suspiciously directed at her. She threw the phone on the bed and wandered into the kitchen, still wearing the same robe from the night before. No makeup, no filters, just herself. She opened the fridge. Empty. Not because she couldn't afford food, not yet, but because the assistant she once paid to keep the place running had stopped showing up. And Vanessa didn't know how to run it herself. She sat at the kitchen counter, staring at nothing. The penthouse no longer felt like a kingdom. It felt like a cage. She had once stood on this very spot and bragged about her future, her ring, her wedding, her empire. Now she stood there with nothing, except the lesson she couldn't unlearn. That pride, when fed too long, always eats its owner. It started with a dream. Vanessa stood in the middle of the market, dressed in white, elegant, flawless, and alone. The crowd passed by as if she were invisible. Then she saw the old woman again, Rose, standing at the same fruit stall, holding a bruised pear. But this time, Vanessa couldn't move. Her heels were stuck to the ground. The woman looked at her. No malice, just that same soft gaze. And then she whispered, "Sometimes, what we kick away is what we'll one day need." Vanessa jolted awake. She sat upright in bed, heart pounding, breath caught in her throat. Morning light bled through the curtains, and for the first time in days, she didn't reach for her phone. Instead, she sat in silence, that sentence echoing over and over in her mind. What we kick away. She got up, pulled on a sweater and jeans, no makeup, no jewelry, and stepped out into the world quietly. It had been weeks since she'd gone anywhere without someone recognizing her. Now, no one looked twice. She walked to a nearby park and sat on a bench beneath a tree, watching mothers push strollers and old couples feed birds. She thought about Mrs. Rose, the way she had stood there with dignity, even after being humiliated. She remembered how she hadn't raised her voice, how she hadn't exposed Vanessa during dinner, how she had simply let truth reveal itself. It stung worse than any insult ever could. Vanessa pulled her knees up to her chest, arms wrapped tight. She didn't cry, not loudly anyway, but something inside her cracked. For the first time in her adult life, she didn't feel powerful, or popular, or pretty. She just felt small. But in that smallness, something unfamiliar began to bloom. Awareness, regret, and the tiniest flicker of desire to become something more than a woman who looked good in pictures. The sky was overcast, and a cool breeze swept through the streets as Vanessa stepped out of the women's center, holding a brown paper bag filled with donated toiletries and fresh produce. She had been volunteering there quietly for the past 2 weeks. No cameras, no followers, just hours of folding clothes and sorting food parcels. It had started as a way to escape the silence of her condo. But over time, something had changed. She had stopped checking her phone during breaks. She had started learning people's names. She had started listening. As she walked down the sidewalk that afternoon, she noticed an elderly woman standing at the edge of the crosswalk. She had a cane in one hand and a bag of groceries in the other, clearly hesitating as the light turned green. Cars rushed past. People walked around her like she was invisible. Vanessa didn't hesitate. She stepped forward, her boots no longer heels, her makeup-free face open and calm. "Let me help you," she said gently. The woman blinked in surprise, then smiled. "Thank you, dear. My legs aren't what they used to be." Vanessa offered her arm, steady and sure, and together they crossed the street slowly, one step at a time. When they reached the other side, the woman patted her hand. "You've got a good heart." Vanessa smiled faintly. "Took me a while to find it." They shared a moment of quiet understanding before parting ways. Vanessa stood still for a moment, watching her go. She didn't post about it. She didn't take a picture. She didn't even tell anyone. But for the first time in a long while, she felt something stronger than power, fame, or wealth. She felt peace. And as she turned to head home, groceries in hand, hoodie pulled up against the wind, she thought of Rose Blake. Not with fear, but with something close to respect. Because sometimes, the people who seem the smallest leave the biggest marks on who we become. 3 years had passed. Vanessa Wright was no longer the face on glossy magazine covers or the star of influencer campaigns. Her once thriving social media empire had gone quiet. She had stepped out of the spotlight not with a dramatic farewell, but with a quiet vanishing act. The woman who now walked through the city wore little makeup, carried a second-hand leather tote, and answered to no PR team. She worked part-time at a community foundation that supported young girls in underprivileged neighborhoods, teaching them confidence, storytelling, and grace. Her apartment was smaller now, cozier. There were plants on the windowsill and second-hand books on the coffee table. But for the first time in her life, Vanessa felt proud of her space, not for how it looked, but for how it made her feel. Whole, real, earned. On a cool Saturday morning, she attended a women's leadership summit hosted at a university downtown. She'd been invited to give a talk, not because of her past fame, but because of how she had rebuilt herself after losing everything. After her panel, she wandered into the hallway, sipping water, her nerves still buzzing with gratitude. That's when she saw her, Mrs. Rose Blake, standing near a display table filled with hand-sewn crafts, talking gently with a group of older women. She looked exactly the same, silver hair neatly pulled back, eyes warm and calm, wearing a simple gray coat with a scarf tucked beneath the collar. Vanessa froze. A part of her wanted to turn around, to disappear again. But another part, the stronger one, made her step forward. "Mrs. Blake," she said softly, voice nearly caught in her throat. The older woman turned. Her eyes locked with Vanessa's, and for a brief moment, there was silence. Vanessa offered a small, nervous smile. "You probably didn't expect to see me here." "I didn't," Rose said, her expression unreadable at first. "I wanted to say thank you." Vanessa's voice was firm but quiet. "Not just for your silence that day, but for your dignity. You didn't humiliate me. Life did, and I needed it." Rose studied her for a long moment, then nodded once, not coldly, not warmly, just deeply. "You've changed," she said. "I had to," Vanessa replied. "It took losing everything to see myself, to grow into someone I'm not ashamed of anymore." Rose's eyes softened just slightly. "Growth takes courage. I'm glad you found yours." Vanessa blinked quickly, trying to keep the tears from forming. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," she added. "I just wanted you to know I'm still learning, and I carry that lesson with me every day." Rose offered a gentle smile, the kind that holds years of wisdom. Sometimes the most powerful apology is change. With that, she reached out and touched Vanessa's hand, just for a moment, before turning back to her group. Vanessa stood there, heart full, not expecting more than that gesture. And it was enough. She walked away without the weight of the past, not because it had vanished, but because she had learned how to carry it differently. She had once been the woman who looked down on others. Now, she knew better. The event wound down as the afternoon light filtered through the tall windows, casting a golden hue over the gathering of women. Vanessa sat on a bench near the courtyard, her name tag slightly curled at the edge, the paper coffee cup cooling in her hands. She had just finished a heartfelt conversation with a young girl named Maya, a teenager struggling with confidence, overwhelmed by the world's expectations. Vanessa had spoken gently, reminding her that worth wasn't in clothes or followers, but in the way she treated herself and others. Maya's eyes had lit up, the same way Vanessa's had, long ago, when she believed image was everything. That small moment felt like redemption in slow motion. As Vanessa leaned back to take a breath, she sensed someone approaching. She turned and saw Mrs. Rose, alone now, hands clasped in front of her, a quiet grace in every step. "May I sit?" she asked softly. Vanessa quickly moved her purse aside. "Of course." They sat in silence for a few seconds, the kind that feels full rather than awkward. "I listened to your talk earlier," Rose said, her eyes focused on the garden in front of them. "You spoke well, from the heart." "Thank you," Vanessa replied, surprised. "It's the first time I've ever spoken in public without pretending." Rose smiled faintly. "Truth has a strange sound to it. People recognize it, even if it's quiet." There was another pause before Vanessa spoke. "That day at the market. I think about it more often than I care to admit." "I do too," Rose said not unkindly, "but for different reasons." Vanessa turned slightly to face her. "May I ask what reason?" Rose thought for a moment. "Because I saw someone who reminded me of myself at a younger age. Fierce, proud, untouchable. I remember wearing that mask too, once." Vanessa's eyes widened. "You?" Rose chuckled lightly. "Oh yes. Life has a way of softening edges, but not without a few cracks." Vanessa lowered her gaze. "Well, I cracked. And you filled the cracks with humility," Rose said gently. "That's more than many ever do." The two women sat in silence again, the afternoon breeze brushing through the leaves, lifting the hem of Rose's scarf just slightly. Vanessa hesitated, then said, "You never exposed me. Not to Ethan. Not to anyone." "What?" Rose looked at her, and her expression was soft but certain. "Because pain teaches best when it comes without humiliation. If I had spoken for you, you wouldn't have listened. But when the world showed you who you were, you had no one left to argue with. Only yourself." Vanessa swallowed. "I didn't deserve your kindness." "No one truly does," Rose replied. "That's why it's powerful. For the first time since that day, Vanessa felt something inside her lift. Not guilt, that had long settled, but acceptance. Rose reached into her coat pocket and pulled out something small, a folded piece of paper. She handed it to Vanessa. "It's a quote I live by," she said. "Read it when the pride in you starts to speak again." Vanessa opened it slowly. In faded ink, it read, "The higher you lift your chin, the harder the fall, unless your heart is just as high." She smiled. "Thank you," she said, her voice softer than it had ever been. Rose stood up, smoothed her coat, and placed a hand on Vanessa's shoulder. "You've already said thank you," she replied, "by becoming better." And then she walked away. No dramatic farewell, no staged forgiveness. Just a quiet blessing from the woman Vanessa once looked down on, and now looked up to. Once, there was a woman who thought the world should bow at her feet, because her heels were high, her smile was expensive, and her beauty shone brighter than truth. She believed kindness was weakness. She believed humility was for the poor. She believed no one could ever touch her, until she touched someone she didn't recognize, and paid the price of pride. That woman was Vanessa. But the tale did not end with shame, it began there. Because sometimes, it takes falling flat on your face to learn how to walk with grace. Sometimes, the universe doesn't punish us for who we pretend to be. It simply waits, patiently, until the mask slips. And when it did, Vanessa saw not the world, but herself. The bruised parts, the hollow applause, the long list of things she thought mattered, shrinking in the shadow of one woman's silence. It wasn't wealth that broke her. It wasn't public shame. It was the gentle strength of a woman she had dismissed, who could have fought back, exposed her, humiliated her, but didn't. Mrs. Rose taught her the most powerful lesson of all. That true elegance isn't worn, it's earned. That kindness is not a weakness, it's a choice. And that pride, when left unchecked, doesn't just destroy relationships, it devours the very soul that feeds it. Vanessa never went back to her old life. Because she had found something better. A quiet peace. A grounded purpose. A mirror she could finally look into, without flinching. So, dear listener, before you judge someone by what they wear, where they stand, or what they carry, ask yourself, what would you do if the person you're looking down on is the one you'll one day need? Pride goes before a fall. But humility? Humility builds the ground you'll be glad to land on. If this story moved you, don't keep it to yourself. Like, share, and subscribe for more powerful tales that teach timeless truths. Because someone out there just might need to hear this today.